Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw Pikachu. Without doubt, one of the most adorable characters ever created. Let's begin with some basic guidelines for the head and the body. Alright, so you can see that the head is fairly round, a little flattened at the top, so that's one thing I would say to pay attention to, but quite round here at the bottom, and notice these sort of little indentations on either side, sort of suggesting cheeks, I think. Down here, and if you can get the head at this size, I'm not really doing measurements here, I happen to be drawing this about an inch, I suppose, from top to bottom, but you know, you can draw this at any size you want. Make sure that the body is basically the same distance from neck to bottom as from neck to the top of the head. Here I got one leg that's kind of coming down, so maybe that distance is a little bit longer, but I would say the basic, you know, if we imagine a spinal cord, does Pikachu have a spinal cord? But that distance from here to there is pretty close to that distance from the top of the head to the bottom of the head. And then, yeah, basically it's the body is narrowing up near where it joins the head, widening out as it gets to the bottom. And I think it's sort of rounded out where the legs are going to join, or the feet, I should say, because it's almost like he barely has legs. Just see the feet poking out of the bottom. Let's go ahead now then and draw the arms and the feet. Alright, now one of the interesting things that I noticed as I studied the character is how large the arms are. They're pretty puffy and wide, certainly in contrast to the legs. As I said, it's almost as if there are no legs, and very often you just see this little indication of a foot poking out here at the bottom. Now I decided to have one of the feet kicking up in the air. I'd seen one illustration that had him in that pose, and so that's exactly what we're doing here. You basically get a very narrow oval, and then you draw a curved line behind it, and that sort of suggests this kicking up leg as as Pikachu joyfully cries, "Pika!" In any case, everyone's like, that is the worst Pika I've ever heard, Mark. Get it right. Anyway, you can see me erasing away just a little bit here where the arms join the body. And, oh, one last thing I was going to say about the hands. Surprisingly, given how small they are, the artists actually do give him 5 fingers and a thumb. I've been saying him. Is it her? I ought to know before I do a video. But there are actually 5 or 4 fingers and 1 thumb. It's very tiny, but it's in there on each one of these hands. And so you do have to sort of pay attention to which one's the thumb, and then go in and do the little fingers. Well, I think it is time to let's do the ears first, and then we'll move on to the facial features. So just as I did with the arms, I'm going to erase away a little here so that the ears join the head. And notice that they're at 2 slightly different angles. Most of the poses I saw had that approach to Pikachu's ears. You want to measure the length of each ear. Again, I would say, well, it's a little less, maybe. I don't know. I haven't sat down and measured it, but probably about the same, really. You certainly don't want them to be longer than the distance from the top of the head to the bottom of the head. Speaking of the bottom of the head, I think I do actually need to erase this away because the head joining in, there's practically no neck, really. The bottom of the head is going to be suggested more by coloring than by a line. All right. And, of course, there are these black areas at the tips of each ear. And the line that you draw across the ear has to be drawn diagonally, it seems to me. It's not just like straight across. It's sloping downward. On each of the outside, I guess on the outside line, sloping downward towards the outside. If you really want to get all the details right, and I think it's important when you're drawing a pre-established character to do exactly as you see the original artists having done, and then maybe later on, if you want to play around with it and do your version of Pikachu, have at it, I say. Well, let's go ahead now and do the facial features. Well, I thought I would stop just here with the eyes and the nose to point out a few things. Notice that the eyes are not that big. I associate really large eyes with cute characters, but interestingly, Pikachu's eyes are not all that large, so be careful when you're drawing Pikachu not to overdo it with the size of the eyes. Notice the distance between them, quite a gap there. I'd say you could fit 1, 2, maybe 2.5 of the eyes between in that space there. And then the nose is really just a tiny little dot. And so the main thing you need to concentrate on is the placement. It's much nearer the bottom of those two eyes than to the top. Let's go ahead now and do the mouth and these two big, I guess they're blushies. Are they blushies? You'll have to tell me. But he's got these two big red dots on his cheeks. So let's get those into place right now. All right, so notice that the top line of the upper lip, I suppose you would say this is sort of parted in the middle. That typical animal type suggests a cat, or I think Pikachu is supposed to be the design is supposed to be inspired by a mouse. Is that correct? Which is kind of surprising because he doesn't really look like a mouse to me. But in any case, I've chosen to give this big wide open smile and then just a line across the back there to show the tongue. And then, as I said, these big sort of red dot blushies that Pikachu has are actually considerably larger than the eyes. I'd say probably twice in diameter. The relationship between those two. Well, of course, we can't be done with this until I draw the tail, so let's go ahead and get those lines into place. Alright, so as you can see, there's definitely some zigzaggy action going on here. The zigs and zags very tightly compacted near the body, and then of course this one gigantic zag, unless it's a zig. Let me know. Is this a zig right here or a zag? That's going to be, I would say, almost this alone is the same size, really, as these three. It sort of looks like 3 zigzags down here. So that'll maybe help you get a sense. And maybe just the entire length from here to here is not so different from top of the head down to the bottom of the body in terms of getting that length right. Now there's a few things I've forgotten here. One of them is the highlights of the eyes, these white dots that are going to be up here, quite large. I was a little surprised as I studied how large the highlights are in the design. I imagined them smaller than that. And then the feet, instead of, we got the 5 fingers, but up here, or down here with the feet, we have just 3 toes. So I'm dividing both of these with just 2 lines to turn it into a 3-toed foot. Now I have decided a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to make this full color by using mainly markers, but also colored pencil. And then I have a nifty little surprise at the end of the video as to what I intend to do with this illustration, or where I intend to go with it, basically, because it certainly is not finished from my point of view. So let's go ahead and pull out one of the markers. Maybe I'll do some of that real time and then time-lapse later on. So I've got a yellow here, a Copic. People are always, what marker is that? Where can I find it? Please tell me everything about that marker. It is a Copic, C-O-P-I-C. And before I start coloring in, though, I'm going to take out this kneaded eraser and sort of dab away the lines a little bit because I don't want the pencil to discolor the marker too much. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll get back to the coloring. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, this has sort of like a brush tip to it. I thought that might be the best one to use for coloring this in. I've chosen markers because it really, I think of Pikachu primarily as an anime character, and that color is very smooth, when you see animation, very smooth from throughout the entire image, and using watercolor or something tends to not be quite so smooth looking. So basically, what can I say about my markering technique here? Just basically doing my best not to leave streaks. Happily with yellow, I think it tends not to, whatever streaks there are not quite as visible as might be with other colors. Later on, in just a second, I'm going to be adding shading with a sort of ochreish, brownish color, which should hopefully make it look even more anime-like, because in a lot of anime illustrations, you see that the shadows are done with a darker version of the same color, basically, or a very similar color, just darker, rather than going in with black or dark gray or whatever. So anyway, I think basically you get the idea here, the speed with which I approach, which is to say not very fast at all. And rather than bore you to death with this part of the process, I'll finish this up in time-lapse and we'll be back to do the shadows. So as promised, I'm pulling out another marker. This also a Copic, but I want to stress there's no need to buy the exact same brand that I use. I would venture to say almost any type of marker would work for an illustration of Pikachu. And so I'm adding just a darker brownish color here on the edges of the illustration. I wanted to point out how I saw some that did a sort of a shadow beneath the chin almost, although you can't really see a chin. But instead of there being a line there, that this was indicated entirely by way of the change in color. And I saw some illustrations in which the part of the tail was in shadow, so I'm going to do that, although it may look weird for a moment. There is a little dark brown area down here where the tail joins the body. I'm going to do that, I've decided, with colored pencil. And yeah, I'll do a little more over here. I guess I'll go ahead and this part will be all real time. Try to get a nice little shadow down here. Now I want this foot to pop out a little, so I'm going to leave that uncolored. How do you like that, huh? This Brooklyn guy drawing Pikachu. Yeah, Pikachu, I'm a big fan. And I have always actually admired the design of Pikachu. I think it's a good example of less is more. By keeping this character simple, the character is more memorable. And I would say that's part of the key to the success of the character's appeal. Well, I'm going to go ahead now and do some of the inking, and I guess I'll start by doing that real time, and then probably time-lapse through some of the rest of it. Now, one of the things about inking an illustration like this that is maybe slightly nerve-wracking is you really should try, if possible, to ink every line with a single stroke. Easier said than done. Basically, as I looked at illustrations, I could tell that the person was not going back and forth over that line. They were just dropping it in with one single stroke of the pen. And I mean, like, you can see a little bit of an imperfection there as I stopped mid-stroke. Part of it, again, in doing these videos, I've taped the paper down. Probably shouldn't do that, but it does make it easier for people to see what I'm doing. And that it's best, I would suppose, to be able to turn the page to work with the natural pivot point of your wrist. And in fact, I think I'll probably do that. Why not? I'm going to cut this thing off of the desk that it's taped down to and finish inking this in a way where you can see it moving around. So yeah, you know, it is a character that is fairly simple to draw, but the inking process can be tricky, especially if you challenge yourself to try to get every line with a single stroke of the pen. I certainly found it challenging, but you are rewarded with a very authentic looking illustration if you do that. Now I'm going to move on. I'm going to take a red marker. This is Le Tracit. He has more than one brand of marker. Yes, I do. I've got such a hodgepodge of different markers that I've picked up over the years. But yes, these little blushies, Pika blushies, are really bright red. So just get the reddest marker you have and go for it. And then I did say that some of this was going to be done by way of colored pencils, and that's what I'm going to do here. It's crucial to get this brown near the base of the tail. That is an interesting little touch, because brown does not really occur anywhere else in this character that I can see. But it basically covers up that first zig before moving on to the next zag. And speaking of zigzags, the brown color itself sort of zigzags across as it comes to a stop. So I don't know how much of that detail you can see. This is about as close as my camera will zoom in. But yes, this little touch of brown here at the base of the tail is surprisingly important for capturing the full Pikachu-ness of Pikachu. I'm going to finish up some of the coloring with colored pencil, and then we're going to move on to my fun little final touch to this illustration. Alright, so we are basically done with this illustration, but what I want to do, I came up with this slightly crazy idea. What if the U.S. Postal Service issued a Pikachu stamp that we could put on all our letters for mailing cute little cards all around the world? And so what I'm going to do is take this image and transform it by way of, you know, pencil, ink, watercolor, and so forth, into a postage stamp, and even put a little stamp, you know, like franking the stamp, canceling the stamp at the end. I'm not going to do this in a sort of teaching way. I'm just going to do it all in time-lapse to finish things off, and I'll be back with some final words. Alright, well, there's my video on Pikachu. Just in case anyone's wondering, 96 cents. That refers to 1996, the year that Pikachu made his debut on the world stage. Sorry there's nothing in this video about how to draw the postage stamp part of it. If you would like to see such a video, let me know in the comment section. Seems like an oddly specific thing to teach. How to draw a postage stamp by Mark Crilly. But if you want it, gosh darn it, I will do that video. But before I go, I want to thank everyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, Brody's Ghost and Miki Falls, my graphic novel series, as well as Mastering Manga 1 and Mastering Manga 2, my How to Draw books. Honestly, it means so much to me when you pick up those books, when you help me out that way. But I think it is time to lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.